Well, my name is Lee Flaherty, and in fact, when my mother first named me, she called me LeGrand, but then I got a job at a drugstore, and the individual there, Clyde Anderson, said, "Can I call you Lee, because LeGrand seems to be so awkward." And so therefore, it's been Lee Flaherty since I was 13. I was born in Indianola, Nebraska. I had two older brothers in Nebraska, a beautiful mother, Frances, an older brother, Russell, another brother, Dennis, and then I was the third. And our father, whoever he was, because I never got a chance to meet him, his name was John Flaherty. And when I was 3 years old, he just took a duck from Nebraska because that was during the Depression years. It was 1934. And things were very tough, and he deserted the family. So my mother was left alone, and there was hardship there in Nebraska. She put us all on a train, and we went out to a place called Richmond, California. It's across the bay from San Francisco, and she set up a house out there for the four of us. Well, when we were out in California, my mother met a fellow named Floyd Price, a wonderful man, and Floyd Price fell in love with my mother and married her and took over the responsibility of three young boys. And we grew up in Richmond. I eventually graduated from the high school that was there. That was in 1949. And then the Korean War started in 1951, and I enlisted. I was a paratrooper. I was with the 11th Airborne, and I was stationed in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I spent 3 years in the service, never went to Korea. The Korean War ended. I went back to Richmond, California, living with my beautiful mother and Floyd Price, who I always called Pop, and was a wonderful father to me. And I went on the GI Bill to the University of California at Berkeley, and I worked at that drugstore for 32 hours a week, and I graduated in June 1957. When I graduated, I did interviews over in San Francisco, but I really wanted to go to either New York or Chicago. The reason being, there was much more marketing dollars, and people said, go to Chicago because you'll work for a man named Pat Cloud, and he's the best in the organization that this company that I went to work for had. Name of the company was Schmidt Lithograph Company, and they had a marketing group that did promotional work. So I came back to Chicago. I arrived here October 20th, 1957. I landed at Midway Airport, and I met Patrick Cloud. He was a Scotsman, but he was born on St. Patrick's Day, and everybody called him Pat. And he was my beautiful, wonderful friend until he passed away in 2000. Pat took me to a restaurant called Armando's. It's gone now, but it was on the corner of Superior and Rush Street. And Pat told me, now, when you come to work here, here's one of the things you do. You work hard, you work with integrity, and you pay attention to what you're doing, and you stay away from the beautiful secretaries that we have, and we're going to get along just fine. But there were 14 people that were in the Chicago office, and I was one of them, and I worked for 5 years for Schmidt and for Pat Cloud, and I loved them. And Pat, in 1962, was due to become president and go to San Francisco, and things happened, and he didn't get the presidency. They put another guy in charge, and everything changed at Schmidt for me. And so I made the decision that I wouldn't stay with Schmidt because Pat Cloud didn't get what he was justly deserving of, and that was to be the CEO and be running the company out of San Francisco, and I was going to be the Chicago manager. So I made the decision to leave. So when my mom was back here in July of '64, she asked, "What's your intentions?" And I said, "I'm going to start my own business." And she asked me, "When am I going to do that?" And I told her, well, I'm going to save some money. My mother immediately said, I have some money. And I said, Mom, my mother had been a seamstress all of her life, the best, a fabulous seamstress. And I said, Mom, you couldn't have accumulated any cash. And she said, I don't have any cash, but I own the home at 2822 Bissell in Richmond, California, and I'll mortgage that. I told my Mom, no, don't do that. Don't do that, because new business is in a realm of a 90% failure at that particular time. 57 is probably the same today. And for the business that I was talking about, the failure rate was probably above 95%. And so I said, no, don't do that. 2 weeks later, I get a check in the mail for $8,500. My mother had, on her own, gone to the Mechanics Bank in Richmond, California, mortgaged that home for $8,500, sent me the money, and on November 1st, 1964, I opened Flair Communications as a marketing services agency and have never looked back. When I opened up Flair, I saw this little building, and it was over on Erie Street. In fact, the address was 214 Erie. And when I was driving to work, I would reach a stop sign that was 2 blocks away, and I'd look across, and I saw this little fatigued green building that was in great disrepair. It was a building that was built in 1883. And something was calling me to that particular building. So when I went in business, I noticed that it had a for rent sign on it. So I contacted the owner, and he said, sure, I could rent the space on the 3rd floor. It had no plumbing for the whole building, had no water, had no heat, but the rent was right. It was $85 a month. That was just perfect for me. So on November 1st, as I mentioned, 1964, I went in business. I took 3 people with me from the Ray Trim Company. One was a creative director, another one was an artist, and the third one was an all-around receptionist, production person. Well, we went in, and as I mentioned, we're on the 3rd floor, and the 4th step going up to the 3rd floor was missing, so you had to be careful of that. There was a service station a block away, and so we bought all of our gas at that service station, and therefore we got a key to the restroom. And business was good the very first year. We came out of the box with the clients that I had done business with for the period of time that I'd been in Chicago, and Accent International was one of our very first accounts. We had Morton Salt, we had Alberto Culver, and we had Certified Grocers. So we went in business, and we had good companies to work with, and I was working with good people. And I was reinvesting the money we made constantly in building Flair Communications as a marketing organization. We eventually got heat, plumbing, air conditioning, and now I bought the building, and I bought that building for $20,000. If you can imagine that. And today, River North is one of the great areas for real estate, one of the hot property areas in the city of Chicago. And we named it the River North, and we helped build River North to be what it was, because when we opened at 214 West Erie and won the Chicago Beautification Award in 1972, the people that were with the architectural companies and those that were writing about architecture, both at the Tribune and the Sun-Times, they said there's this beautiful little building on a mud flat on the west side of Chicago. So the mud flat we named River North. And I bought the building. The 2nd floor we named that the Francis Room. And we had grown from the original 4 people to 65 at that particular time. And we had opened an office out in San Francisco, and we had another office in New York. We eventually were recognized as one of the top 10 creative environments in America. 50-year period, we were voted the most outstanding marketing agency in 50 years. We had won the most World Hall of Fame promotions from 1964 until 2014. And we had been the marketing agency of the USA, #1 for 15 of those 50 years, and the Wall Street Journal chose us as America's great brand builder. And in terms of my personal, I was a marketing all-star for 18 years, and I was the marketing man of the year 6 times. I had a unique oval staircase put into the area between the part of the building that was original and to what we added on in 1970. And we were just 3 floors for the original Flair house, but for the addition that I put on, we added the 4th floor, and the 4th floor was our rooftop garden.
Rooftop gardens doing enough of them is the equivalent of taking tens of thousands of cars off of the road. They can have a huge impact.
Abold said a recent survey revealed that Chicago has 80 to 100 rooftop gardens, all now eligible to compete in the city's annual landscape contest.
There's just some remarkable projects out there that have been going on year in, year out. Before it was primarily local neighborhood gardens. Now it includes categories like rooftop gardens. There's an amazing amount of competition that goes on.
Well, we're in the urban environment. I mean, there goes the L trains, which is a half a block away. So I would suggest that we're right in the middle of it. And,
as founder of a successful communications company and the Chicago Marathon, Lee Flaherty knows much about competition and about how things grow.
And it's all being driven by the energy and the passion of one man. Mayor Daley is just unbelievable into making Chicago the most beautiful city in the world. And as you probably know, just last week, all the people in England in the travel business voted, and they voted the city they'd most like to visit was Chicago.
Flaherty's offices, just a few blocks north of City Hall, are topped by a roof garden, an expression of his desire to do his part to contribute to the quality of life in Chicago, and, he admits, to encourage good employees to stay with his firm.
Everything just catches on and that momentum starts to build and all. The city has a program right now. If you go and you get the entire block together, the city will give you $7,000 to use in plants and all to beautify your side of the street. Those things I just think are so marvelous because other than just being beautiful, it has so many practical things to it. When I was out in California, I was a friend of Jack LaLanne's, the godfather of fitness, and he had a gymnasium over in Oakland, California, and all of the guys that were at University of California, they said, you know, if you can go through Jack LaLanne's workout, you get $10,000. Now, $10,000 in 1957. So I went over to see if I could go through Jack LaLanne's workout, and I was like everybody else that tried it. About halfway through, I had to go to the bathroom and throw up. You just couldn't outwork LaLanne. And yet we became great good friends. And in 1957, he was towing Miss San Francisco and Don Sherwood, who was a leading disc jockey in San Francisco. So as a promotional for Jack LaLanne and his fitness and in his gymnasium, he would do every birthday, prove that he was getting younger. So for this particular birthday, he was going to swim across from the underneath the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco over to Marin County. And he'd be towing this 2-ton boat with Miss San Francisco, Sharon Lee Gleason, and Don Sherwood in it. And he did indeed make that swim. I was invited to where Jack was living with his beautiful wife, Elaine. They lived on a houseboat in the Alameda estuary. And when I was there, I got to meet Miss San Francisco. And 3 years later, I married her. I met some other mentors, and one of them was Father Stephen O'Donnell. And Father O'Donnell was over at Old St. Patrick's Church. That's the oldest public building in the city of Chicago, on the corner of Des Plaines and Adams Street. And it survived the Chicago fire. And I was a parishioner over there in '64. And I introduced myself to Father O'Donnell because I had heard about him. He was a hero of the Battle of the Bulge. He was the chaplain and had the rank of major when he was in the service. He was the chaplain for George Patton's Third Army. And when World War II was over, he came back to Chicago, and they gave him the toughest assignment possible. They put him over to Old St. Patrick's Church. Nobody was over there. I mean, nobody. The mass that I was going to was at a 9:45 mass, and there'd only be 48 people in the church. And Father Stephen O'Donnell kept it going, because for all the Irish that are here in the city of Chicago, they weren't going to church there, but that was still the touchstone of what many of them thought about. And the man that was keeping it going was Father Stephen O'Donnell. He'd go to the union halls when they needed a new roof. He'd go to when they needed heat for the boiler room. He'd go into the union halls and he'd tell those workers there, you gotta come over and help me out. And he kept that church going all of those years. In '64, he told me, a man that you should meet is Arthur Rubloff. And Arthur had done so many good things to keep Old St. Pat's relevant. And I met Arthur Rubloff, and he became my other mentor. And between the two of them, I was blessed. I mean, truly, truly blessed. And I carry that blessing with me today because of how fortunate I was to meet both of those great men. Arthur Rubloff founded the Magnificent Mile. He contributed so much. When he died in 1986 in May, his motto was, when he was alive, I made my money in Chicago and I'll leave my money here. And he did indeed leave a fortune that by today's standard would be $1 billion. And he left it to various charities. He invested to Jewish organizations. He also invested so much in terms of what was going on within the Catholic Church. And the Civic Federation was founded in 1894. After the 1893 Columbian Exposition, he left money in a trust for them. And Arthur was a great, wonderful, generous man. He was my sponsor in 1979 when I received the Horatio Alger Award. And then he helped me with Father Stephen O'Donnell when in 1984 I received at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, I was made a Knight of Malta. And how did it happen? It happened because I knew those two great men. And they were my mentors, and I followed what they told me. Work hard with pride, dignity, integrity, and always remember to give back. In fact, Father O'Donnell would laugh when Arthur Rubloff would say to me, you've reached the top, Flaherty, now send the elevator back down. You know, Arthur said to me, you gotta fluff yourself up a little bit. You know, you gotta get a little better dressed. And I said, gee, Arthur, I think I dress well enough. He said, no, you don't. He said, you should have Lawrence Pucci making your suits. And he said, he makes my suits. And I said, well, Arthur, you're splendid. You are the magnificent Arthur. Other than what the Magnificent Mile's all about, you are indeed the magnificent man. And you know the way you dress, and the bowler hats, and the top hats, and the ties, and the pocket hankies, everything. You're Mr. Everything. He said, fine, I'm talking about you. And so I'm taking you over. I'm buying you your first suit. I'm buying you a suit at Lawrence Pucci, famous tailor. Arthur, you don't need to do that. And he said, I don't need to do anything. I do it because it makes me feel good. Arthur was fantastic. I can remember that downtown they had Franz Bentler and the Royal Strings, and they were playing. They were one of the famous groups that were here. Franz Bentler had a Stradivarius violin. He was Mayor Richard J. Daley's favorite for all of the royalty that was being entertained in the city of Chicago. Mayor Richard J. Daley would always have Franz Bentler perform. Arthur invited me to come up to his home one time, and he said, hey, bring your daughter Shannon, too, with you. And I said, fine, because I'd told Arthur about Shannon. He knew it was going to be her 16th birthday. I go up to Arthur's home, condominium, catty corner from the Drake Hotel. We walk in, and Arthur said, I'll be right back. And he disappears. He comes back. He's holding a cake with 16 candles because Shannon's there with me. And behind Arthur is Franz Bentler playing Happy Birthday on his Stradivarius violin. That's Arthur Rubloff. That's this fabulous guy. That's this terrific guy that I said, Arthur, can I go dig around into your closet and see what's in there? He had a man that dressed him every day. That's why he was so turned out and beautiful. And so I went in, I'm looking at everything, and he got all of his shoes with the shoe trees in them, and they're in velvet bags. They're all in their beautiful little wooden cubicle, and I pulled out one pair. They were a pair of purple suede shoes. And I looked, and the soles weren't scuffed or anything. I said, Arthur, what about these shoes? You've never worn them. Why did you buy the pair? He said, oh, well, because I liked them. That was Arthur. I founded the Chicago Marathon in 1977. And I had an idea. I had run Boston Marathon in 1976 for the bicentennial, and it was 106 degrees at the starting line, and a lot of people were saying to me, Flaherty, you've only run one marathon before to qualify to run Boston, and it's so hot, you're risking your health. And I got thinking about it. I was. And I thought, I'm a businessman. I'm not a marathon runner. I'll listen to what the doctors are telling me, and I'll forget about competing. And yet, a small little voice said, don't worry, my dad can do it. And when I was flying back, I said to my mom, Mom, I'm going to start a marathon in Chicago. And my mother said, if you do that, don't just have a lot of men running around in their underwear, as my mother described it. Do something to make a marathon meaningful, like do something for charity and get the women involved. It's nonsense to say that a woman can't run 26.2 miles. Of course they can. So with Mayor Melandic, in 1977, I suggested him we should have a marathon. And they said, look, for one time only, we don't want to make it a political thing, the marathon, so for one time only, let's honor Mayor Daley and make it the Mayor Daley Marathon. I said, that'll be fine, one time only, because if you take and make something political, you immediately get half the people against you, and you got half the people for you. So we wanted it to be nonpartisan. So it'd be a nonpartisan marathon. And then I said, look, if you build this, I've talked to 26 CEOs of companies out there, and I told them the marathon will be great. We could do something that would equal the 1893 Columbian Exposition. Nobody of those 26 CEOs, they didn't believe me. So I said, we as a Flair Foundation are going to sponsor it. we'll fund it. But I said to Mayor Blandick and to Park Superintendent Kelly, if you bill us park and city services, it's a deal breaker. And they said, we have no intention of doing that. We're going to waive those services because we, as the taxpayers, Illinois taxpayers, are going to own the marathon. You're going to be the lifetime sponsor and the steward. And so I funded it, and we knew we were going to have a new sponsor in '78. We didn't. We did it. We put it on. It was terrific. We had a sponsor that said, "Look, I'm not going to be the CEO until 1979," and that was Jim Dutt, who became the CEO of Beatrice. And they were the second largest company in the city of Chicago in 1976. And so we said, "Okay, we'll run it the second year, '78." Flair funded that. It was the Mayor Daily Marathon again. One time only. We're going to make it a political kind of thing. And then we had America's Marathon Chicago. Beatrice was a sponsor in cooperation with Flair Foundation because we provided all the marketing services to Beatrice about the marathon pro bono. Now, Beatrice was bought out by Junk Bonds, and we lost them as a sponsor. They were a sponsor for 8 years. Mayor Washington came and told me, "Look, I got a sponsor for you. I got the G. Harmon Brewing Company. That's old style beer. They've been bought by the Australian group, and I've convinced them to sponsor Chicago's marathon, and they're moving from La Crosse, Wisconsin, and their headquarters for America is going to be right here in the good old Chicago, USA, the heartland of America." Unfortunately, they went bankrupt. And in 1990, we were faced with a real dilemma because the international athletes hadn't been paid their prize money and all of the suppliers hadn't been paid. So the marathon was in great difficulty. So to save the integrity, Flair Communications again sponsored 1990, the Chicago Marathon. We had the Mercy Home for Boys and Girls, and they said, "Look, you're in some difficulty right now," and they had a Father Jim Close over there, a good friend of Father O'Donnell's out of Old St. Pat's, and Father Close said, "Look, we at Mercy Home, if you can get the other charities that are benefiting from the Chicago Marathon to step aside and let Mercy Home be the sole charity, we'll take and fund it for you, and we'll give you our good name because we were founded in the 1800s, and we will carry you forward until you get a permanent sponsor." So for those 2 years, we had the Mercy Home for Boys and Girls was our sponsor. LaSalle Bank came in, and LaSalle Bank said in 1983, "We'll take over the sponsorship." And LaSalle was terrific. They had a wonderful chairman there and president and CEO, and that was Norm Bobbins. And they really got behind the marathon, and they were just a bank that was in the city of Chicago, but their parent was one of the 10th largest banks in the world, ABM Emerald. And so they helped us because they promoted Chicago's marathon globally, and our sponsor was LaSalle Bank. And it was fantastic for 14 years.
World's largest 26.2-mile foot race. Takes hundreds of people, volunteers, all kinds of folks to make this thing work, but it began with one guy. One very special Chicagoan, and Mr. Lee Flaherty is here with us today. It's such an honor to have you here for a bunch of reasons. One of which is I'm running on Sunday.
Well, that's why I'm here.
I'm nervous as heck. Maybe some tips from me a little later on. But where did this come from? Where did
Run
this?
fast.
Well, fast as I can. Where did this start for you?
Well, it started in 1976. That was that was America's 200th birthday. And so I decided I'd go up and run Boston, which I did. And it was 103 degrees at the starting line up there. But I finished, and when I got back to Chicago, I said, we ought to have a marathon here.
Because you love Chicago?
Well, I had 3 goals in mind. One was that we would have a world-class race here like they had in New York, which was formed 7 years before. The second was that we'd add to our international image. And then the third, we'd do it uniquely different than Boston or New York, and we'd run it for charity.
Are you awed or humbled by looking now, all these many years later, and seeing what you started has become? I mean, looking at this video and seeing all these people.
I'm glad you asked that, because I should be humble and say that, I couldn't find a sponsor after I talked to 27 CEOs, but I'm not going to be humble. I said the marathon's going to work, and so I own a company called Flaherty Communications. I put together a foundation, and we underwrote the marathon for the first year. It was fabulously successful. It was the first and biggest startup marathon ever, and then underwrote it again the next year, proved it was successful, put it on the street, and since that time it's just unbelievable.
It amazes me, too, how Chicagoans in corporate Chicago gets behind things that are good for this city, how people rally around wonderful events like this one.
Well, it's we've had at LaSalle Bank for all these years, and they were just an outstanding sponsor. And then before LaSalle, we had the Beatrice Foods Company. So yes, they do rally around great
You're
things.
being a little modest on me, though, because did you not run this thing for free for about 16 years?
Well, yes, we as a company, pro bono, put it together for 16 years, and then after that particular period of time, I said I'm spending too much time in doing charitable work, and I have to concentrate on the company, and so I went back to running my business on a day-to-day basis. But
charitable work is
always been involved with the marathon.
Such an important part of what this marathon's about. I'm running for a cause near and dear to my heart, Street Level Youth Media here in Chicago, and your advice to me is to run fast?
Yeah,
I
run
definitely
fast,
didn't overtrain.
run for trade. Well, bingo, first thing, do we have a world-class marathon here? One of the original goals? I guess we do. We've had more world records than anybody out there. It is the largest in the world. And then number 2, international image, fantastic. And 3, it'll raise over $10 million.
Started with you, Lee Flaherty. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Sunday, October 7th.
Mayor Richard M. Daley was trying to get the Olympics here, the 2016 Olympics, and when LaSalle was bought out by Bank of America, he said, look, it'll look disruptive if we change sponsorship, so let's let the Bank of America be the sponsor. And I said, fine, as a lifetime steward, we'll let them be the sponsor, but they're not ideal because they only want to promote the marathon in Illinois. When we didn't get the Olympics, Mayor Daley retired. And I said, well, we'll just have to be patient, and we'll wait and pray for a new mayor that's going to really be terrific and optimistic and supportive of the marathon. And lo and behold, in 2019, our prayers were answered because we had, as optimistic as I was in 1977, when everybody said, no, forget it. We can never put on a marathon in the city of Chicago. They wouldn't close down the streets. It won't happen. I said, no, we can make it happen. And I had a wonderful group, 24 people, that a gold medal coalition that helped me make it happen, and they were like me, they were optimists. So in 2019 we had Mayor Lori Lightfoot. You talk about an optimist. She ran and she won, and then we're in business again for taking the marathon to new glory. We did some fabulous promotions for the Morton Salt Company. You know, salt is salt. It says 13 cents for a package of salt. The cylinder package, that lasts a household for about 6 months. So salt isn't a big deal, but Morton Salt was the premier. They're the only ones. You've had other people that try to get in the salt business, just doesn't work. And so to keep focus on an unexciting product like salt, we developed the Morton Salt mugs. And the little girl that's on the Morton Salt package, when it rains, it pours. The little gal that's with the umbrella over her shoulder and she's walking along. Well, over the years, there have been multiple package designs of that little girl. So we had the 4 different girls on 4 different mugs, and we did this mug promotion, and it was just phenomenal, unbelievable of what we did in terms of appealing to the consumer. In fact, it was named the premier promotion of the year, and it was named the #1 premium that was offered. And so the people over at Morton Salt were delighted, and like we were, obviously. In 1984, the Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty, they really needed an uptick. They were starting to show its age. And so we were contacted. President Reagan contacted me. I knew him out in California because out there we had the California Milk Advisory Board, and that was a big organization out there, and so politically organized, and they were big donators to Governor Reagan when he was a governor there. So we said what we should have is a Run for Liberty. So we put on Runs for Liberty in 123 cities. In 123 cities, we did it in 1984, 1985, and 1986. Over a 3-year period, we raised $62 million for the restoration of the Statue of Liberty. In 1985, getting to be more local here, Old St. Pat's, they were over there. They were starting to build their parishioners that would come back to the church. The west side was getting gentrified, and Father Jack Wall was over there, and I suggested to him we ought to do a block party. We'd do the world's largest block party. He said, well, no one's going to come to the west side. It's still the wild west side. I said, wait a second. We get people to come here because Irv Kupcinet is the columnist for the Sun-Times. Everybody reads Kup. Kup has a column. If you want to know what's going on in the city of Chicago, you read Kup's column. And then Wally Phillips was the top radio personality in all of America. Everybody from Chicago out to the West Coast listened to Wally Phillips. And so between Kup saying, if you're doing something in July 1985, the place to be is the world's largest block party over at Old St. Patrick's Church, Adams and Des Plaines. And then Wally kept promoting it in all of his radio broadcasts. So when that first block party did take place, we had 10,000 people for the first day, sold out. We had 10,000 people for the Saturday. It was just phenomenal. And Father Wall, I can't say enough about what he would be if he was in the marketing business. He'd be a marketing genius because he really understands marketing. He's done just a remarkable job over at Old St. Pat's. And to take over after Father O'Donnell, he had our big shoes to fill, and he did it indeed. He was a giant of men like Father O'Donnell was. One of the biggest public art exhibits in America, the most impactful public art exhibit in America took place right here in the city of Chicago in 1999, and that was Cows on Parade. We didn't invent the Cows on Parade or conceive that idea, but that show that they had here with Cows on Parade, they had 382 companies, and these companies took and they decorated a cow, and then those cows were placed in strategic positions throughout the city of Chicago. We had 4 different cows. We had the Uncle Sam cow, and that cow was representative of who our big client was, and we had American Dairy Association was our client. So we had, for the Cows on Parade, we had the Uncle Sam cow, we had the Top cow, and we had our Flair House cow. Every company, every of Chicago's top 50 Fortune 500 companies, they all had cows represented. They were out there. So to make that meaningful, when it was all over, on November 9th, 1999, Lee Flaherty suggested an auction. And we had the auction at the Chicago Theater, and of those 352 companies that had cows, we convinced 82 of the companies to give us their cow, and we would auction the cow at the Chicago Theater. And they could choose the charity that those funds should be donated to. So we gave our cow up, of course, the Uncle Sam cow. And I might add, Uncle Sam cow raised $155,000 for the milk fund for the American Dairy Association. And they had the Maryland Monroe cow, and that was the second biggest fundraising cow. All in all, we raised $11.3 million with that auction. I get a phone call, and the guy says to me, I represent Rolls-Royce in America. I said, that's really fine and stuff, and said, we have one of those Christian Brothers 200th anniversary decanters. The printed material that went with that told the history that was within the box, everything was so fabulously elegant. It just said quality, and it says Rolls-Royce quality. And so we would like to talk to you about doing some marketing work for us here in America, but we can't give you any money. And I said, that's a unique kind of proposal. They said, no, we haven't finished. We'd like to get together with you. Maybe we could meet. We'll drink a little Christian Brothers wine. We might even have some brandy. We're going to tell you the idea that we have. And I said, I'm always open to ideas. And so we got together. We met. We met over at one of Arnie Morton's restaurants. We're in there, and the people at Rolls-Royce said, here's a situation. We just want to keep a presence in America. We sell all of our cars, very select, maybe 2,000 cars sold in America, starting price like $370,000 a car. He said, what we'd like to do is have you do the marketing. We can't give you any money, but we'd give you a Rolls-Royce. You would have a Rolls-Royce, and the good thing, we give it to you, you do all the marketing work, and then you get to keep it, and you can resell it. And it's amazing how much that $370,000 car maintains its value. And now we're not going to do that much work, but you'll have the car. And I said, fine. So for the first year, we did work with them for about 5 years, and they said, you finally, and so we would tell them this is what it would cost, this is what it would cost. So finally, over 5 years, we did $370,000 worth of work, and they said, okay, fine, we're going to restart our deal again. You got the car, you can resell it. So the car, we had a brown, chocolate brown Rolls-Royce. It was beautiful. It was brown and tan. That was our corporate colors. So the car fit, tan and brown. We had that for 5 years. Next year, took us 7 years to work it out the next, because they weren't buying that much promotion work. Then the third year, we changed our logo colors, and we got into the browns and the reds and all. And so we switched over, and we got a silver Rolls-Royce. So I have a driver. We have a Rolls-Royce. The Rolls-Royce says who our client is. The Rolls-Royce says the kind of quality that we are. So if you're going to do marketing with Flair, you got Rolls-Royce quality. The work that we had done for the wine and spirits business was a wonderful man, and his name was Ed Horrigan. And we had Cutty Sark Scotch was one of our clients, and we did all Cutty Sark work for all of those years. And then Ed Horrigan left the world of wine and spirits, and he was recruited by RJR. And he went to work down in Winston-Salem, and he was down there as the chief executive officer of RJR Tobacco, and immediately he said, we want Flair Communications to be our marketing services organization. They had Cool, the Cool menthol cigarette. We put together the Cool Mix, Cool, K-O-O-L Mix, M-I-X-X. We put together these Cool Mix programs, and that would be done what they call on-premise. We'd go in and we'd do programs within a city, and all the bars throughout that city and all the clubs were featuring the Cool Mix program. And they became our second biggest account, only next to American Dairy Association. It was fantastic. We were doing a ton of business. And then my mother, who I always listened to, my mother said to me, she's the only person called me LeGrand. She said, LeGrand, you cannot be doing the cigarette business and be doing the dairy business. You can't be saying get healthy and run a marathon and raise money for charity like the cancer organizations that's going on. You have to resign the tobacco business. I said, Mom, it's our second biggest account. She said, I didn't ask that. I said, resign the marketing business at RJR. And I said, yes, sir, mother. What, am I going to tell the founder? Am I going to tell the person that mortgaged the only thing she had at 58 years old, gave me the money to start at Flair, had all the confidence in the world that I'm going to make it when the ratio of failure was like 96%? No way. No way. And then my mom, I named the Francis Room after her. I'd take her on vacations. I surprised her one year. We went into Washington, D.C. to the Dallas airport. We jumped on the Concorde and we flew over to Paris together. Landed in de Gaulle airport. I entertained my mom because she was the all-time most fabulous mother anybody could ever have, and she did it for me. So she told me to do something, ABC, I did it. We resigned the tobacco business. Never looked back. In 1976, in December, Mayor Daley had passed away, and the new mayor that was elected for the interim of his particular term was Michael Blandick. And of course, Arthur Rubloff and Father O'Donnell knew Michael Blandick, and I was introduced to him. And I knew Ed Kelly because of the different sports things I was involved in. And Ed Kelly, other than being a park superintendent, he's a legendary coach. He's coached so many champions in baseball and in basketball and boxing, I might add. So I knew the legendary Coach Kelly, and now I know Mayor Blandick. He had every intention of being the mayor for the next 4 years when they were having the election in 1979. And what happened? They had a snowfall like you couldn't believe. The trains couldn't run. There was no place to park your car on the city street. We were up to our eyebrows almost with snow. And on the basis of that, the voters were so angry with Mayor Blandick that they voted for Mayor Jane Byrne. So in 1983, we had a new mayor, and it was Mayor Jane Byrne, and she loved the marathon because she wanted it to be like my mother. She wanted it to be equal for women. And she was such an advocate for the women. And she said, make certain the prize money is the same for men that it is for women. I said, but of course. And then Jane Byrne didn't get reelected. She was in there for 4 years. And in 1983, we had Mayor Harold Washington. And he was a delight, an absolute delight. The mayor was out there, the consul wars were going on, and the mayor told me he boxed when he was a young man, and he knew that I had boxed for 4 years and was an all-service boxing champion, a middleweight, and the mayor kidded me that he boxed as a middleweight. Great guy. Unfortunately, he served not even his 5th year. He died 2 days before Thanksgiving. Arnie Morton over there. I needed some help, and it was the marathon. We were on some tough times. I told you that G. Hyman gone bankrupt, and we'd stepped forward, Flair did, and we paid the International Athletes Prize money, paid all of the vendors and suppliers to keep the integrity of the marathon together. So Arnie said, I'll help you. And he said he'd opened a place called Zorene's, other than Arnie's, his famous restaurant. Zareen's was a private club, and Zareen's was named after his wife. And he said, we're going to do a fashion show in Zareen's. And we get all those people that are members, and we'll get them to come, and all the proceeds are going to go to help you, Lee. So I'm over there, and they're performing. Everybody pro bono stepped forward. The models are in the city of Chicago. They said, of course, we'll help Lee out. So the models stepped forward and said, we'll model. Saks stepped forward and said, we're going to provide the garments that they're going to be wearing. We got the people going to provide the free beverages. That was Rocky Wirtz, Bill Wirtz at that time provided. So everybody stepping forward and helping out, volunteerism, which Chicago's so famous for. Well, we got there, and finally they said to Arnie, you know, Arnie, the models say that they're going to take up so much room to change, and the changing takes up all the space. We're not going to be able to get a capacity crowd in here. And Arnie said, we got to have a new place for them to change. And Arnie said, well, we'll put a dressing room right out there. And he pointed to the brick wall in that 54 condominium building they're in, and he said, we're going to put that together right there. They said, but that's a brick wall. He said, well, that's easy. Just knock out the bricks. And indeed, that's what they did. They knocked out the bricks. They put a tent out there that opened up another occupation of maybe 35 or 40 people to go down there at Zareen's to raise funds for me. Arnie Morton knocked out a brick wall. When the thing was all over, they boarded up the brick wall. Nobody was going to deny Arnie because he made that building famous with his restaurant. Zareen is still alive. Arnie passed away, God rest his soul. And we have that, I tell the story because Zareen loves me to tell it. I said, I had a friend like he'd run through a brick wall for me. Well, I can tell you, I had a friend that ran through a brick wall for me. Cavassier, a real high-end cognac. They wanted to be unique and different, and they really didn't know what to do. And so we came to them with an idea. We said, let's take Erte and those magnificent artwork that Erte has done, and let's put him on a series of bottles. Let's select and say there'll be a series of 6. Collect the Cavassier Erte collection. And so we started with that, and it was phenomenal. We took an ordinary bottle. We had it made unique and different and all. And then we took and put the Erte on the bottle, and we were selling that cognac, which you could go in and buy a bottle all day long for $25. We were selling those at $250 per decanter. We had Erte come over from France. He visited with us. He signed some of his original pieces of artwork and gifted them to me. And so I started making a collection of Erte, of which I gave the first one to my mother. And then I put together the collection from then on. And then I got hooked on, let's do something that's in that same genre, at that same time period. And so I started to buy travel posters that fit into that era, and then other artists Garou was an artist that did unique pieces of work. And then even modern artists like Leroy Neiman, he had that appearance of the Impressionism and Art Deco. And so I bought some of Leroy Neiman's paintings. And so I grew that particular art collection until I had 172 pieces of artwork, and that covered all the walls within Flair House. And it was something that I took great personal pleasure in. The pieces I bought, I'm not saying I bought masters, but I had a unique collection I put together, and it's a great satisfaction. I'm part of what called Flair Tower, and that's at 222 West Erie Street and it's right next door to where Flair House was, and I owned the property there, and with the developer of that particular property was put together the McCaffrey, Dan McCaffrey, great developer, was developing the building, and the architect was Joe Antunovich, and Joe Antunovich and McCaffrey, I wanted to call it Flair Tower, and I didn't know how to approach that to them right away, and then they were wondering, and they said, you know, Lee, would it be okay with you if we call it Flair Tower? So, boy, we all met, the developer, the owner of the property, and the architect. And so there is Flair Tower, and I took 150 pieces of artwork I had, and so the minute you enter Flair Tower, there's artwork on all 26 floors in the public area. When you get off the elevator, there's artwork. When you go down the halls, there's artwork. When you come into the lobby, there's artwork. So that's what I've contributed. There's little plaques on each one that describes that this was made the courtesy of Lee Flaherty. Did it make any difference? They opened Flair Tower, and in the history of renting units, the all-time record, all the units were rented in Flair Tower in about 5 weeks. Unbelievable. And they said, just felt like it was so lived in because each floor had artwork. And it was an Art Deco looking building, and all the artwork reflected the same time period. Yeah, I'm proud of the Horatio Alger and the Knights of Malta Award, and also I am a Chicago legend. The Illinois Landmarks Commission, they wanted to honor people that have done a lot for Chicago. The first person that they honored was Lois Weisberg as the Commissioner of Cultural Affairs, and then they chose me, and along with me, they chose Harold Ramis and Ernie Banks. And so with the three of us, all became legends.